Your friend is 63 and slowly disappearing. You see him at the gym 3 times a week. Same place, same machines, same routine. But he's not getting stronger anymore. He's getting smaller. Not in his body, in his presence, in his voice, in the space he takes up in his own life. His phone lights up every few minutes. Quick replies, short updates, tiny permissions disguised as normal conversations. Still at the gym. Heading home now. Do you want chicken or fish? You notice he never stays long. He leaves early. Cancels plans. Stops saying yes. The hiking trip? Not this time. Dinner with old friends? Maybe next month. That photography class he once dreamed about? Gone. Not because he's tired. Not because he can't. But because somewhere along the way, his life stopped being fully his. And the strangest part? He calls it love. He calls it responsibility. He calls it being a good husband. But what you're really watching is a slow fade out. A pattern most men never notice until decades are gone. Because aging doesn't make a man smaller. But constant negotiation, constant emotional management, constant self-editing, that will. And if you think this is rare, let me tell you about James. I am 68 years old, former professor, married 42 years, did everything right, and still woke up one day realizing he had quietly disappeared inside his own life. When James mentioned a dream he'd carried since he was 30, traveling alone to Iceland to photograph the Northern Lights, the conversation ended almost instantly. Why would you go alone? That's selfish. Married people don't do that. And just like that, the dream went back on the shelf. No argument, no rebellion, just a quiet retreat. The same way dozens of his other desires disappeared over the years. Not in dramatic sacrifices, in small, polite surrenders. So subtle, he didn't even notice he was training himself not to want things. Until wanting something for himself started to feel wrong. Then at 66, life hit him with something he never saw coming. His wife asked for a divorce. No screaming, no betrayal, just a calm sentence that shattered for decades. I haven't been happy in a long time. James was crushed, but not just because the marriage ended. Because in that moment, he saw the equation clearly for the first time. 40 years of compromises. 40 years of postponing himself. 40 years of maybe later. For a relationship that had quietly ended long before the paperwork did. The first year alone felt like walking through fog. He didn't know who he was without the role of husband. Every habit, every routine, every decision had been shaped around someone else. The silence in his home felt loud. Freedom didn't feel exciting. It felt unfamiliar, almost illegal. Then one morning, sitting with his coffee in a quiet kitchen, a question surfaced he had avoided for most of his adult life. If not now, when? At 67, James booked the ticket. Iceland. Alone. 2 weeks. No itinerary except the one he'd choose each morning. He stood under the northern lights, green fire moving across the sky, and something inside him broke open. He cried, not from sadness, from recognition. A part of him he thought had died decades ago was still alive, just buried. When he came home, his kids said he looked younger. Not fewer wrinkles, more presence, more energy, more. After that, a quiet transformation began. He started saying yes. Yes to a cycling group he would have once called impractical. Yes to university lectures just because they sounded interesting. Yes to old friends he drifted from when life became too busy. And slowly, a difficult truth settled in. Some of the freest, most alive years of his life began after his marriage ended, not during it. People around him didn't like that. They told him to start dating again, said no one should grow old alone. That companionship was necessary. So he tried. A few dinners, a few pleasant conversations, nice people, easy smiles. But he felt something familiar creeping back in. Subtle expectations, unspoken roles. The quiet shift from getting to know you to how do you fit into my life. And this time, he noticed it early. For the first time, James understood something clearly. He wasn't afraid of being alone. He was afraid of disappearing again. So he chose something different. Not isolation, not bitterness, alignment. A life where his time, energy, and identity weren't slowly negotiated away. And that decision changed everything. Here's the part nobody warns men about. You don't lose yourself in one big moment. You lose yourself quietly, politely, lovingly, one small compromise at a time, until you wake up living a life that no longer feels like yours. James refused to let that happen again. He rebuilt his life around his own rhythm. He traveled when he felt the pull, took classes just because he was curious, protected his mornings like they were sacred, spent time with people who energized him, not people he had to be managed around. No negotiations, no quiet shrinking, just a man finally living in alignment with himself. Another older man once said something that hit like truth you can't unhear. Every time I started dating again, I could feel my world getting smaller. Not because she was a bad person, but because I slowly stopped being fully myself. That's the lesson men are never taught. Loss of self doesn't feel dramatic. It feels reasonable. It feels mature. It feels like this is what adults do. Until years pass and you realize you've been editing yourself out of your own life. And later in life, the cost hits harder. Because time isn't theoretical anymore. Energy isn't unlimited. And peace becomes more valuable than approval ever was. This isn't about hating relationships. It's about understanding a simple truth. A relationship should add to your life, not replace you inside it. After 60, something becomes crystal clear. You already know who you are. You know your pace, your preferences, your boundaries, your values. Protecting that isn't selfish. It's survival. Because stress now doesn't just stay in your head. It shows up in your blood pressure, your sleep, your immune system, your years. Meanwhile, a life lived in alignment, even alone, can be unexpectedly alive. Solitude, when chosen consciously, isn't emptiness. It's space. Space to think without interruption. Space to breathe without tension. Space to exist without performing a role. And here's the shift many men realize too late. Being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. You can share a house and feel invisible. You can wake up alone and feel completely at peace. The difference isn't how many people are around you. It's the quality of your relationship with yourself. When a man becomes comfortable in his own company, everything changes. He stops chasing connections out of fear. He stops tolerating situations that shrink him. He only chooses relationships that genuinely expand his life. That's not giving up. That's clarity. Your later years are not meant to be one long negotiation. They're meant to be the season where you finally live with the wisdom you spent decades earning. So the real question isn't, should I be with someone? It's, does this connection make my life bigger or smaller? Bigger means more energy, more joy, more authenticity. Smaller means less freedom, less peace, less you. And at this stage of life, math matters. Because your time is precious, your energy is limited, and your peace is too expensive to trade for the wrong kind of company. Aging alone isn't a failure. For many men, it's the first time they ever truly live on their own terms. Not half of compromise, not a role, just themselves, fully. And that kind of freedom, for some men, it's the most powerful chapter of their entire life. So if this story felt familiar, if you saw yourself or your future somewhere in it, don't ignore that feeling, because clarity comes quietly, and most men only recognize it when time is already gone. If you believe a man's later years should be lived with freedom, self-respect, and peace, not quiet disappearance, then this channel is for you. Subscribe so you don't miss what most men only learn too late. Like the video if this message hit home. And in the comments, tell me one thing you refuse to give up as you get older. Your time matters now. Protect it.